Hello, so I am Anne-Zahra Chemsseddoha from Toulouse in France, and I'm pleased to be here with you and give a presentation that I have prepared with my colleague Xenia Khalalambidou about tumuli in early Iron Age Greece, a multifaceted phenomenon. In Greece, the grave-tumulus is a well-known funerary architecture type used from the Bronze Age to the Hellenistic period. During the early Iron Age, its employment is well attested in the organization of the cemeteries in northern Greece. For example, in the tumulus necropolis of Vergina. Because of scholarly focus on northern Greek tumuli, the wider phenomenon practiced throughout early Iron Age Greece has been largely overlooked. Even if many communities use individual graves in flat cemeteries for their disease, collective tumuli are also attested in central and southern Greece, but also on the islands. This paper introduces our recent research on Greek early Iron Age and early archaic grave tumuli. As the presentation time is short, we will focus today on tumuli on the Greek heartlands from the 10th century to the 7th century BC. The word tumbos, first expressed in the Homeric epics, is a blanket term. It concealed various sorts of burials, markers, and multifaceted and eclectic realities. In the epic, the tumulus is an essential landmark in the deathscape and in funerary rituals. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, most described tumuli have an individual character and are built on the location of funerary pyres, as shown, for example, by the tumuli of Hector. Nonetheless, in some cases, the tumulus might cover multiple burials, as shown by the monument of Patroclus, planned to receive Achilles' body remains. Although not mentioned in the Iliad, in the Odyssey, the same monument is even attested as a triple burial monument, with the addition of Antilochus' cremated remains next to the above-mentioned burials. What does the archaeological evidence show? It indicates a strong differentiation in burial practice between a burial marker in the form of a small cairn above a burial, or the circular funerary construction, often collective, then covered by a lower high mound. From an architectural point of view, tumuli surrounded by a stone curb with one front are different from the funerary perevoli, whose walls are freestanding. They have two fronts and have no mound. Tumuli with their dome-shaped profile and circular-like plan become special points of attention in the landscape with a strong symbolic meaning. A mound which covers a single tomb structure, a tholos, for example, does not involve the same procedure or the same technical requirements in its use as does a collective tumulus, even though they both may host many burials over time. Here, the tumulus creates a more structured collective layout as regards the spatial organization of the deceased within its boundary, becoming a cemetery itself. Here, the deceased are commemorated both at the level of their own grave and at the level of the tumulus as a communal burial marker visible from a certain distance. Tumuli have been found isolated, grouped together, or integrated to larger cemetery. So a cemetery that includes tumuli does not exclude the presence of other types of burial. For us, a burial mound cemetery is defined as a funerary context where the tumulus is the main or the most characteristic structuring collective element used for the spatial organization of the burials. In our presentation today, we will focus on collective tumuli, namely lower high mounds covering several distinct graves. Today, we will not touch on either isolated tumuli found in flat cemeteries or mounds with a different function, such as that covering the so-called 10th century tumba building at Lefkandi on Boea, or the metropolis tumulus on Naxos that covered at around 700 BC earlier funerary enclosures which were used for ancestor cult. In Greece, collective tumuli are attested at least since the early Bronze Age. For the Bronze Age, a seminal publication, Ancestral Landscapes, edited by Elisabetta Borgna and Sylvie Muller-Selka, presents the topic for all Greece and adjacent areas. But for the early Iron Age, no such holistic study has been conducted to date. even though, as mentioned above, tumuli are attested throughout the early Iron Age and the Archaic period in many parts of Greece. However, as noted earlier, for the early historical period, interest had been focused particularly on northern Greece, seeing tumuli mainly has a northern Aegean specificity or a peripheral phenomenon of the Greek world. True, this phenomenon is particularly marked in this region, where it is also neither unique nor very uniform, but different types of early Iron Age tumuli are also well attested further south, as recent study indicates. For example, in Camillovisi and Boeotia, Tsikalario on Naxos, and recent discoveries at Anavlokos in Crete. This research is designed to appreciate the many facets of the tumulus phenomenon throughout Greece and to address questions that have been somewhat overlooked for early Iron Age examples. Starting with the early Iron Age, most community organized their burial in open ground context, and some chose a collective tumulus. We wish to know how such people set modifying their environment to host their dead and how they achieved lasting monuments to their memory and identity. We approach our goal by various avenues or topics, inspired by the approach developed for Bronze Age tumuli in the co-edited volume Ancestral Landscapes. The early Iron Age and to early archaic tumulus phenomenon in Greece is far from being uniform, and in recognition of this, we are focusing on the following variables: the location of the site, the spatial organization of the tumuli, the elevation and stratigraphy, the tomb types and human remains processing, the funerary recruitment, commemorative rituals. What we will be presenting shortly for the need of this paper our first remarks about the general distribution and spatial organization, surrounding topography and choice of location, variety of construction, and the social strategy behind the tumuli. We will begin with a geographical distribution. Given keeping in mind that this map reflects more work in progress, the current precision of archaeological research, and is not the full story of the early Iron Age reality, we observe immediately a wide geographical distribution of the collective tumuli in Greece, mainly on the mainland, but also on the islands. Nevertheless, and unlike the Bronze Age, to date, such monuments are barely attested in the Peloponnese and Western Greece. Still, this map disposes of the older notion that from early Iron Age, the tumulus becomes a specifically Northern Aegean features. Regarding the chronology of the tumuli, we observe that the oldest tumuli used in the Proto-Dramatic onwards are located in northern and central Greece and on the island of Samos. First, in northern and central Greece, the continuity of this tradition from the late Bronze Age to the early Iron Age in certain regions is clear. For example, in southern Pieria or in the southwestern Rhodope Mountains. In Thessaly, late Helladic tumuli were not popular. There are only two known examples at Gounoi and Hexalophos, but tumuli become more prominent during the early Iron Age. Secondly, we observe very occasionally the phenomenon that some tumuli built during the late Bronze Age remain in use in the early Iron Age. For example, in southwestern Rhodope again, or in central Greece is the well-known Bronze Age Marmara tumuli in Neochori site. Thirdly, some new tumuli cemeteries used in the early Iron Age were actually founded during the transitional years from the Bronze to the Iron Age, around the 11th century. For example, the small stone tumuli with enclosure associated mostly with cremation urns in Paleogene Necrocastro, and possibly the tumuli with cistern in Naples. It is from the beginning of the first millennium that the tumuli phenomenon expands, noticeably with the foundation of large tumuli cemetery, for example, the cemetery of Vergina, where more than 40 early Iron Age tumuli have been excavated, or as well the burial mounds of the area of Halos Boulokaliva in Thessaly. However, for other regions, Attica, Naxos, and Cyclades or Crete, early Iron Age collective tumuli are hardly even encountered before the middle, for Naxos, or the late geometric period, for Attica and Crete. Taking Greece as a whole, the early Iron Age burial mound cemeteries are evenly distributed. For example, in the actual region of Western, Central, and Eastern Macedonia, collective tumuli are more frequent in the hinterlands, whereas no collective tumuli have been recorded to date from the northeastern part of the coastal area of the Ternary Gulf to the Chalkidiki Peninsula. Instead, vast flat cemeteries were the rules there. In Boeotia, the tumuli have been found in areas where flat cemeteries are also attested. About the spatial organization of the tumuli, we observe different patterns. In a few cases, a tumulus has been discovered standing by itself. To date, this cannot be attributed to a burial mound cemetery. Such exists in southwestern Rhodes. However, this apparent solitariness can be due to preservation processes, since tumuli can often be exposed to erosions and agricultural activity. In some areas, the tumuli are numerous but scattered in small groups. This seems to have been so in southern Attica, around Anavissus. In 3 cases, the geometric tumuli are grouped by pairs. However, they could have formed bigger clusters too. In Epirus, in the Pogoni region, several small groups of tumuli have been found along the Gomos Valley, each associated with a small settlement, reflecting a dense occupation pattern. The topographic plan of the site of Paliouria, near Paliopyrgos in Epirus, reveals how the tumuli are both connected and separated with the habitation areas by walls, terraces, and enclosures. Tumuli are, of course, also grouped in larger cemeteries. Here, they were used as the main collective architecture to dispose the remains of the deceased. In northern Greece, tumuli are being built since the early Bronze Age, especially in southern Pieria. However, in the early Iron Age, we observe the development of large burial mound cemeteries with more burials. In the case of Vergina, the tumuli are organized in a specific funerary site, like the so-called flat cemeteries. There, at least 40 early Iron Age tumuli have been identified and excavated in the field below the hillside where the Hellenistic city flourished. According to the last publication of Andrea Breuning and Immaculée Delmeyer, the cemetery expanded from several core tumuli. This formed the clay around which other tumuli were added throughout the early Iron Age. In this case, it's not so much the individual tumulus that become a landmark in the landscape. Their dimensions are only of middle size, but the mass effects they create. In Thessaly, in the Voulokalliva area, approximately 40 tumuli have been identified as well, set between 2 rivers. Other funerary structures of uncertain character have also been found nearby in the monument. 2 other cases of group tumuli are seen to share the same space with other funerary structures. The Tsikalario cemetery in inland Naxos is one. A network of pathways has been detected within the Tsikalario necropolis, and the main country path passed by the cemetery entrance, where a slab was erected. During the first phase of its use, around first half to third quarter of the 8th century BC, the most representative funerary structures are circular and elliptical collective stone perivoli enclosures from 9 to 12 meters across, most then being covered by low tumuli, probably filled with stones and soil. But other types of tomb coexisted, system in the vicinity of a rectangular enclosure, a pit grave, etc. In Crete, on the lower slope of Anavlchos, recent excavations conducted in the necropolis of Lami have identified at least 8 tumuli, and in the same area are also small tholos tomb and 1 funerary enclosure with cremation in secondary deposits. Different structure, practice, and rituals coexist here. Most of the tumuli have been found in lowland areas, on the edges of plain or in Piedmont, or possibly on the outskirts of arable lands. In mountainous landscape, as in Epirus, tumuli are found at the entrance of valley or along a river on routes of passage. In Attica, several tumuli were found close to circulation routes as well. A few sites were located at a higher altitude or on a specific and prominent position. The location of the Tsicalario cemetery in inland Naxos on a rocky outcrop on the gneiss core of the Naxos metamorphic dome has been remarked upon by Xenia Jaralambedu. Possibly not far away from an early Iron Age settlement in the area of Apano or Tsicalario Castro, with a panoramic view of over the inland plains. So the Tsicalario tumuli and other funerary structures provided visual evidence of the local inland community's prosperity, which probably derived from the entitlement of these people to agricultural resources in the plains of the hinterlands. As a general rule, a specific appreciation of the surrounding topography is necessary to better comprehend how people work in their particular environments. The location of tumuli, their spatial organization, and their dimension raise the question of their impact on the landscape, their visibility, and their perception by people. In the Homeric epics, a prominent location seems to be prerequisite for the tumulis of heroes. In reality, the choices underlying the foundation of tumuli at a precise location will be multiple, accessed by roads, available material resources, etc. Moreover, their external appearance can change through time according to their use. Tumuli often continue to be used by later generations, long after their initial construction. The dimension of the early Iron Age collective tumuli varies significantly. Three main dimension categories can be observed. The small tumuli, less than 5 meters in diameter, for example, the stone tumuli of Palio Tieneco Castro. The tumuli of middle size, with a diameter between 6 and 20, the tumuli is like, for example, the tumuli excavated in Epirus, in Vergina, and on Naxos are such. Vergina, most of tumuli have a diameter between 12 and 18 meters. The large tumuli with a diameter above 20 meters. In northern Greece, they are only attested in the cemetery of Ios Panteleimon. The tumuli cover hundreds of burials. In Vergina, apart from one tumulus covering at least 59 burials, all the others contain an average number of 8 burials. 8 to 10. Large circular and elliptical tumuli are also characteristic of the area of Ulokaldiva in Thessaly, with an average size now between 20 and 30 meters. However, these clearly have expanded over time, a phenomenon not clearly attested for most of the tumuli in northern Greece. Elsewhere, as for example in Attica, the size of the geometric tumuli varies between 2 and 30 meters in diameter. The early archaic tumulus in Soros and Marusio reaches a diameter of 46 meters. The size of a tumulus has an immediate impact on their visibility in their place, in the landscape. Moreover, the visual impact did not depend only on the size and the monument, but also on the perception these monuments held for those people beholding them. Such perception may have been subjective. The testimony of Pausanias about the so-called Aepitus tumbos is eloquent. In the Iliad, the tomb of the king Aepitus from Arcadia is referred to as a tumbos. But Pausanias, when describing the mount, underlined that this tumulus is modest. However, the tumulus could have been more impressive for Homer, since according to Pausanias, Homer had not seen a bigger monument. It is worth noting that in Arcadia to date, no tumuli have been uncovered. The collected data make manifest the variety of tumuli extant in the early Iron Age and early archaic Greece. In this presentation, it is not possible to discuss all of them. Nonetheless, some remarks can be made about some types of tumuli in certain regional specificities. The first groups correspond to collective stone tumuli with cremations. In northern Greece, this feature recalls a tradition well attested further in the north and the central Balkans from the Bronze Age. Nonetheless, there are local specificities and variation with the introduction of inhumation in Paleogene Castro or in Drama, where the cremations coexist with Petrus burial. Stone tumuli with cremation, but also inhumation, are also attested in Thessaly, in Mount 36 at Volocaliva. The interior of the Tsikalario grave tumuli often contain cremation, but for some vessels, containers, we do not know what they held. The remains, be they cremated or inhumed, are lost. Furthermore, it is likely that the periphery of at least some of the Tsikalario tumuli were also used for anchitrisme for the Middle Geometric II, Late Geometric I onwards, the main period of use of the interior of the tumuli and into the Archaic period. From Boeotia to Attica, the tumulus display a wide range of burial practices. Most excavations in Attica are old, and in many cases, no excavation plans are available. At least, some of the Attic tumuli seems to have been built around one or several previous burials. In most cases, cremation and inhumations are both attested, although these rites are not necessarily contemporary. Another type already known in the Late Bronze Age is a collective earthen tumuli with or without a stone encircling kerb. They cover inhumation, mostly in seized grave. The majority are radially oriented to around the center of the mound, rarely occupied with a central grave. They recall the stone tumuli already known in the Late Bronze Age in the mountainous central Greece. So near the Marmara tumuli. It recalls also some tumuli in southern Albania, and further beyond the Republic of North Macedonia, the so-called clan tumuli, illustrated by the tumulus of Beranci. Nonetheless, local specificity are also observed, like the multiple use of the tomb with ossuaries in the case of Aios Panteleimon. The tumuli of Vergina do not belong exactly to the previous category, even if some common features can be observed. Most of tumuli are made of soil. The tomb types are varied, with pit grave, anchitrisme, and a few urn cremations. All ages seems to be interred. Most yielded 1 to 22 tombs, some done below the level of the mound, other placed within the mound filling. Indeed, without any clear stratigraphy, it's difficult to understand the genesis of the tumuli. One tumuli stands out with its 59 burials. According to the recent publication, it was raised in several phases. Despite the diversity of tombs and manner of processing the human remains, we can observe a certain homogeneity in the internal spatial organization of the burials, largely radially oriented toward the center of the mounds. In many Northern Greek tumuli, the circularity of the tumuli seems to be an important feature. Regional studies on grave tumuli indicate the potential to understand the social strategy behind the construction of this funerary structure. We should keep in mind that the construction of collective mounds implies de facto the participation of a segment or segments of the community. Like other necropolises, burial mound cemetery play a major role in the territorial structuring of the communities, in particular through their impact on the landscape and in the affirmation of collective identities. Stature and wealth do not seem to be prerequisite for the deceased of the tumuli. Indeed, the tumuli of Vergina contain both modest and wealthy burial. Social status there was expressed in grave goods, particularly in grave goods, so jewelry and weapons. Particularly instructive here are the Attic tumuli. The reason behind the spread of the Attic tumuli from the second half of the 8th century onwards is a key matter for investigation. The same, of course, is true for other regions. On Attic tumuli, Orestes Goulakos surmised that such a pattern might reflect a shared feeling among a group of individuals, as well as a conscious effort to separate themselves from other members of the community. Tumuli, as collective funerary monuments, could be connected to kinship groups and were often used by more than one generation. Goulakos maintained that, apropos of the geometric Attic tumuli, it cannot be argued that they contain burials of upper class. Since, as it becomes evident from the well-researched area of Anavisos, other cemeteries in the area hold richer burial than those under tumuli. He therefore believed that the primary cause for the erection of tumuli, at least in geometric period, can be sought elsewhere. He proposed that the appearance of the Attic tumuli should be related not to the rise of the so-called Attic aristocracy, but to the growing strength of kinship ties, association, and their subdivisions, such as fratria, gene, or oikoi, can be supposed to lie behind these deliberate acts, employing collective tumuli for the burial of kinship groups. It is, however, still possible that in the archaic periods, elite members used the burial under tumulus following Homeric inspiration to display status and power within their community. Differentiation strategy can also be observed with the construction of such collective funerary structures. In certain regions, the funerary chose to build these impressive structures at Cicalario and Naxos in an imposing landscape can be seen as a strategy to distinguish Cicalario from more mainstream Naxian mortuary traditions. It indicates a desire to demonstrate the status of this inland community during the period for the Middle Geometric II onwards, when construction of the Cicalario tumuli probably began, and when the developments of that laid the groundwork for the establishment of the polis of Naxos were underway. While the harbor town of Naxos developed out from the late Bronze Age settlement, and its residents later established a long-lasting ancestor cult, in all likelihood manipulating their ancestry to reinforce their standing on the island, inland kinship groups had to mark themselves and their individuality differently. As argued elsewhere, the question of why a community would choose to adopt burial practices that seem rather idiosyncratic within its own regional context arises also in other areas of the Greek world during the early Iron Age and in the archaic period. In the case of Halos Voulokaleva tumuli in Thessaly, Ioannis Yorganas argued that the people there choose a different mortuary practice, the unique cremation par-care combination, to create a new identity. He maintained that this identity did not have to do with a distinctive ethnic group struggling to promote or defend its different ethnic background, but with the community trying to establish its individuality by detaching itself from both past and contemporary traditions. Further research in the areas revealed, however, the presence of tumuli at a number of sites along the inner route connecting the Almiros plain with the region of Elasson as early as the proto-geometric period. This showed that this phenomenon in this area was not as idiosyncratic as once believed. In the case of northern Greece, the situation is contrasting and still difficult to comprehend. In Eastern Macedonia, the construction of tumuli follows a tradition implanted in the Bronze Age and includes new burial customs, like the Anchitrismos. In other areas, however, the development of burial mound cemeteries probably related to new social reality and differentiation strategies. Nonetheless, further research needs to be conducted here to understand the particular choices of these communities. The uneven recording of published data and the unequal site preservation adversely affect our knowledge. Nonetheless, a selection of general criteria can offer a base for comparison between the sites and can help us comprehend the multifaceted tumulus phenomenon in early Iron Age Greece. Another problem is the lack of published evidence on stratigraphy of these funerary structures, especially since the life biography of a tumulus can be complex. Above all, tumuli should become the subject of interdisciplinary research. An illustrative example here comes from the Thessalian tumuli. It revealed the complexity of funerary practices that emerge when anthropological study is brought to bear. At the site of Voulokaleva, and more specifically from Mound 36, the study of the cremated, documented, and inhumed skeletal remains revealed the gender and age group of the deceased from this tumulus. The presence of both sexes represented in the assemblage, as well as range of age groups. from adults to adolescents, young adults to infants and children. Moreover, the evidence here suggests that the relationship with the dead was much more complex than originally believed. It was clearly not considered over with the transformation of the body either through cremation or inhumation. The occurrence and the amounts of rituals has been detected. Cremation of human and animal remains, removal and secondary disposal of the remains, offering tables, funerary feasts, as well as the burning of the metal and ceramic objects in situ. All indicates that the presence of complex mortuary practice and extended rituals that went beyond the cremation and inhumation of the dead. Thereby was formed some sort of ancestral cult, ancestral ties, something that can be art for a certain other Aegean tumuli, for example, in Cicadario and Naxos, where their period of use extended much beyond their constructions and the disposal of the first deceased. We would like to present some concluding remarks and food for future thought. First of all, as we have endeavored to make explicit, there is a wide geographical distribution of the collective tumuli in Greece, mainly on the mainland, but also on the islands. This fact challenges all the notion that the tumulus phenomenon is a specific early Iron Age and Northern Aegean feature. In Northern and Central Greece, the tradition of collective tumuli goes back to the Bronze Age, whereas in some other areas, as for example in the Cyclades, there does not seem to have been a significant earlier tradition in tumuli. In this region and in early Iron Age Attica, where Bronze Age tumuli don't exist, the tumulus phenomenon occurs mainly from the 8th century BC onwards, and this is an important pattern to remark upon. Is this phenomenon related to the particular strength of kinship ties in some areas of Greece? Ancestral ties is another phenomenon observed at several tumuli all over Greece. Patterns indicating a range of activity in successive periods of use can show a conscious promotion of ancestral links by later generation. Finally, it's only through comparative regional study and interdisciplinary research that tumuli can be persuaded to reveal their diversity and their social significance. Thank you very much.